right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 117 of the Hideout, where we will be talking about all things Web3, gaming, and the Metaverse. We have another great panel. I know we are waiting up. There we go. We've got all of our guests on stage. So we've got a stacked panel today. Looking forward to a really great spaces. This panel is going to cover a lot of different areas of the Web3 space. So I'm excited to get into some things that we don't always cover on this space. Everything, dive a little deeper on some of these points, get away from some of the gaming themes, although we have a few people representing the gaming space, and dive into some other stuff. So really excited. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nick Frontera. I am one of the founders and the CEO of Apollo Entertainment, the company behind the Satoshiverse and the Legions 2029 game. If you're not familiar with Legions 2029 or the Satoshiverse, real quick, we've been building for about 4 years now. Started back in 2020 as a blockchain-themed comic collaboration with the legendary Jose Delbo, who was a 60-year Marvel and DC comic artist, turned crypto artist in his later years. So definitely had some fun in the beginning, and for the last 3 years, we've been building our game, Legions 2029. It is a fast-paced, free-to-play, hack-and-slash PC game, which is a mouthful, but I think the best thing that you can do if you want to learn about Legions 2029 is check out our post at the top of the spaces. We just started our season 2, so now is the perfect time to join because we have a ton of free stuff. The game is completely free to play if you are a PC player, so you can jump in, you can compete on our timed challenge leaderboard, which is where we do prize competitions, and you can win lots of prizes, including USDC. And then there's also a battle pass that is free where you can get lots of NFT items, including aesthetics for the game. And right now, those are pretty rare. So, doing that now as we are going into a period where we've got a lot of exciting things coming up that we're going to be announcing in the next month or two. So stay tuned. But our big announcement last week was season 2 and all that comes with it. So definitely check it out if you haven't already. All right, so what we're going to do with this spaces is we're going to start with some introductions. I'll call on you guys. Tell us a little bit about what you're building, what brought you to the space. Feel free, if you have anything visual or informative, to pin it to the top of the spaces. We definitely like to show people, even more than telling them. So if you've got something cool, feel free to pin it up there. If you've got anything going on that you want to direct people's eyes to, feel free to pin it up there. And then what we'll do once we finish the introductions is we'll jump into some questions for everybody, and then we'll do some individual questions. And then before we know it, the space will be over and we'll wrap up. So why don't we not spend any more time with me blabbing, and we will introduce our first speaker. Let's go over to Scott. Welcome to the space. Tell us about what you guys are building, and welcome.
Hey guys, I'm Scott. I'm the community manager for Seed Photo. I'm excited to be here today. Basically, what Seed Photo has built is an NFT marketplace for photographers. I think it's absolutely amazing. One of a kind marketplace that promotes the true digital photography versus AI art or any of that stuff. We're really concentrating on the photographers photographing itself, because in the end, I feel like sometimes it's a little bit of a dying art. So we want to keep that alive. And we have some very talented artists that are on there, as well as we have Cash Click too, which helps build the Web3 communities. It's an amazing application that is part of Seed Photo, and I mean, you have to check that out as well. So thank you for inviting us here today. I'm excited to speak in this space. So thank you so much.
Amazing. Yeah, photography has always been something that I've loved to see in the NFT space, and such a, there's so many issues. I remember back in 2020 when we were just getting started, and I was helping other artists come into the space. I was able to work with an artist named Walter Eos Jr., who, if you don't know him, is one of the most famous sports photographers of all time, but an old guy, and his son was actually helping him release some of his artwork as NFTs, including, some of the most iconic shots of athletes we ever seen. And at that time, there was really no market for photography, let alone sports photography. But people really latched onto these iconic photos because, they were natively digitally, or some of them were natively digital, some of the newer ones. And then some of this was, stuff that just stands the test of time, right? It represents history. There's so much more to a photograph sometimes, and it's so cool to see, this emerging. So really excited to hear more about what you guys are doing, and you can jump in further in the individual questions. Let's go over to our friends at Terminus. Welcome to the space.
Hi everyone. Well, thank you to be part of the Hideout series, and happy to connect with Satoshiverse. Yeah, I like what you do. I think gaming and Metaverse have so much potential in Web3. Well, my name is Alex from Terminus Network, and we are a pay-fi solution that anyone can use to buy things using the cryptocurrencies. That means that you can go to a restaurant, grocery shop, coffee shops, anywhere, scan the QR code and buy your food or groceries using your, best crypto like USDC, USDT, Solana, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and so on. And not sure if there are some shop owners in the audience, but the beauty of it is that from the merchant perspective, there is nothing to do because the amount will be directly converted into local currency and directly sent to your bank account. Currently, we're operating in Thailand and Vietnam, and we want to expand to more countries later on. And yeah, happy to be here, and thank you.
Amazing. Well, definitely, as we move into this kind of blending of the digital world and the physical world and talking about real use cases of crypto, I think that, the ability to actually use crypto as a means of payment kind of brings that real world, like, well, what can I use it for? Well, you can buy whatever you would buy with a credit card or cash, using crypto. And I think for the longest time, there were so many friction points there. And I'm excited. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about, the logistics and those friction points later in the spaces, but it's such an important thing as we talk about the usability of crypto for more and more solutions to do exactly what you said, make it easier for merchants, right? And I think we talk about this a little bit in the gaming space as well. Make it easier for developers to use crypto. Let's focus on the value proposition, not the hurdles. So very excited to have you guys on. And I know we're going to hit the payment angle again with one of our other speakers. Let's jump over to Ancient 8, who is here, our friends there. I think we have Nick on the account. Tell us a little bit about your journey. You guys have been all over the Web3 gaming space and are now doing some really cool stuff. So tell us a little bit about Ancient 8.
Good morning, guys. Can you hear me? It's the first time I've joined a space on a laptop.
Yeah, yep, hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, so a little bit about Ancient 8, or I guess I can take one step back. I'm Nick. I'm the BD over at Ancient 8. I was previously doing some marketing with a Web3 game called Mixma beforehand. Also helping a studio called T3 Play with their TGE and their upcoming Polygunners game launch as well. And a little bit about Ancient 8. So Ancient 8 actually started off as a guild back in the Axie days. And since then, I'd like to think that we've kind of grown and expanded. We've created a pretty big community, especially in the Southeast Asia area, not only users, but builders as well. And what we do is we are a gaming focused L2 now, building alongside the Optimism Superchain. So we got a few verticals going. We have Good Morning Vietnam. We help co-host that out in June. We also have our grant program that's going live all year. And then we have other cool things like Space 3, where we basically bridge our users with gamers as well. And then as mentioned, right, we have our gaming focus L2. And so what we're doing is we're focused on bringing some more products, more games, more dApps over the Ancient 8 chain. And that's what Ancient 8 is in a big nutshell, right? We help games with UA distribution. We have our gaming focus L2. And then we also help our other company, Kairos Ventures, with GM Vietnam every year with that conference. We also host hackathons sometimes. We hosted one back in December. So we're definitely trying to keep our hands in Web3 gaming, but obviously trying to expand beyond just Web3 gaming with this gaming focused L2. So that's pretty much Ancient 8 in a nutshell. without getting too much into detail. And, I know we got a big amount of people here on the panel, so definitely want to get to the other guests so we can get to the topic. But Nick, I appreciate the invite and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's amazing to have you. We met at ETH Denver, and I've been learning about H&A ever since. And I knew it as a guild, but now seeing all you guys are doing in the space, I think that's so important, right? Because it is still a relatively niche community that we're part of, even though sometimes it feels like the world to us. It is a relatively small group compared to the rest of the world. And so, it's awesome to see people coming together and doing great things and helping propel builders. I think at the end of the day, we need more builders. We need, projects and protocols supporting builders, and that's what it's all about. If we're gonna, rise the seas to rise all the ships. So thank you for being on. We're excited to have you. Let's go over to our last speaker at Bando. Tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing. Welcome to the Spaces.
Hey guys, thank you so much. Thank you to Satoshiverse and the Hideout for the invite. We're very glad to be here. So yeah, I'm Acid, Head of Communications of Bando. Bando is a new spending protocol. Actually, we launched the last week. We're very excited. I'm very happy to show to all the world what we're building. We are a dApp focus on that you can spend your crypto easily and directly with just with less than 5 clicks. You can buy everything you want: Uber, Amazon, Subway, Chipotle, Target, whatever you want. We are actually now on US, Mexico, and Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, and Ghana. So we are very excited for this launch. I'm going to share with you our launch post so you can give some love, and if you want to try the applications, feel free to do it. Feel free to give feedback. And we are actually now on Celo, but we're going to add more countries and more chains in the next few days. And thank you so much for being here, and it will be a pleasure to share more about Bando in this awesome space.
Yeah, so we're going to dive in, I guess, pretty deep on payment processing and how to use crypto in the real world, as we have two projects doing some awesome work in that space, and it's so needed. And there's so much world to cover. I think as gaming projects, we have this space every week, and we think about, like competition in the space, and the reality as we go to these conferences, we're all kind of trying to push this narrative forward that if one of us succeeds, all of us can succeed, because at the end of the day, we just need the space to become more cohesive and more usable and more adoption. And I think all these early players, doing great stuff, which is why I love hosting this space, is we get to see it all. Usually like just launched last week, just launched 2 weeks ago. I think that's the cool part about attending these spaces and hosting these spaces, is we're seeing this magic happen, at the start. And it's really cool to still feel early, right? Because, I've been in this space since 2017. Sometimes I feel like I've been in it forever and I'm late to things, but every week we meet people doing awesome new stuff, and it's really cool to see. So definitely excited to dive in deeper. And for that, we've got our host Spencer here, who will do some housekeeping items, and then we will dive into the spaces. So welcome.
What's going on, everyone? Thank you, Nick, for the introduction. So yeah, as Nick said, I'm going to run through a few of the housekeeping items and then get us right into the questions. So the first thing I'm going to do right now is pin a tweet to the top of the space. So I just pinned that tweet that says "We're live" from the Hideout. So we do a giveaway every week on the Hideout where we give away 5 Satoshi's crystals, which is one of the main in-game resources within the Satoshiverse in our game Legions 2029. It allows you to upgrade all of your in-game items, like your avatars and your gaming skins and weapons. So yeah, really important resource. All you have to do to enter that giveaway is repost that tweet that says "We're live," and then just stick around until the end of the space when we close out. So good luck to everyone who enters. Next, I think Nick explained this a little bit in the beginning, but just to reiterate the format of the space, I'm going to start out with a group discussion question. I will call on someone to start, and then feel free to just jump into the discussion from there. No need to raise hands or anything like that. Then we'll move into some individual questions for each of you guys, and then if we have time again at the end, we'll do some more group questions. So let's move us to the first group question, and why don't we have, let's see, Why don't we have Scott start us out on this one? So do you think it's better to be chain agnostic or to go all in on one ecosystem right now, and why?
I think it's important to open up to more, and the reason being is there's different users on different chains, and the usability of it is important. So when you're opening your project up to more chains, you're giving people the opportunity to enter into your space, right? And if you're limiting yourself to one, you might be missing out on different groups. For instance, like B&B with us, Ethereum, like all these ones that it's so important. Binance is really popular in Asia, for instance, versus in the US, where Ethereum might be popular in the US or one of the other chains. So, I mean, in our Polygon, for instance, that we have as well. Like, that's a big difference is opening it up, and everyone has different costs when it comes to transactions and that as well. So, I mean, people are very particular on what they're using. So I think it's always important to open those avenues up for sure.
How about anyone else want to jump in? Maybe Nick, what do you think about? I know you guys are building a protocol, but you also have a guild that works with games that are on various different chains. And I know in the past we've spoken about being on multiple chains. What do you think about this idea of being chain agnostic or trying to be chain agnostic versus kind of zeroing in and working with a specific partner?
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually had a few conversations, just with a couple buddies that also work in the industry around games and deciding on chains. Even, a few studios I've worked for in the past we're trying to decide chains. And I think it's kind of interesting because we've kind of hit this point where on the tech side, chains are all pretty quick, right? I wouldn't say they're all pretty easily accessible, but they're all pretty quick. They're all pretty cheap as well, right? So you can kind of throw that out the window. And so it's kind of interesting when picking a chain because it almost feels like they're like publishers at this point, right? You want to pick a chain that has users, a community. You want to pick a chain that's also going to support you. I've talked to a lot of games, especially during our grant program, right? And they might be with a chain. They might be looking to go multi-chain. They might not be too happy with their chain. And normally a lot of the things that I was told was the support. We get no support. Team doesn't really talk to us. We would just like to try to align a marketing plan and we can't get them to do so. And so they almost feel like they're kind of left in the dark, or the change doesn't care. So it's really interesting in terms of being chain agnostic or going exclusive, just because I know chains like Ronin, right? Ronin is an exclusive chain. If you sign with them, I know that they just went open source, but beforehand it was, you had to be accepted in, right? So I think down the road, we're going to be chain agnostic. That would just make the most sense, right? It's still so complicated to bridge Web3 and a seamless experience with games. I think we're still pretty early in that sense and that there's still some things that need to be hashed out. But in a perfect world, I turn on my Xbox. I turn on my PC. I go to Epic Games. I go to Steam. I play the game and I don't have to interact with blockchain at all, right? In CS2, I'm able to sell my skins. Well, I want to be able to sell my skins on a website or an open economy very simply without having to get a wallet or bridge my ETH over to AVAX and then send my AVAX to my Coinbase to then sell it for Solana and then sell my Solana to Phantom. You see how fucking crazy that is sometimes, right? So it should be chain agnostic, at least for gaming. This should not be this complicated. So those are kind of my thoughts on it. I think, chains are kind of going the publisher route. You're kind of starting to see chains start to lean towards certain focuses, memes, AI, gaming. Some aren't even focusing on gaming anymore. So I think that might be another factor, right? You'll see chains like, Avalanche where they have a diehard community. Say to Solana. Solana and AVAX have diehard communities. So you might see people go there just to raise publicly more than, I don't know, other chains. I guess you could say that might not have as much volume or a big community. So, it's going to be interesting. I kind of ranted. So long story short, I think that it will be chain agnostic. I think being exclusive to one chain might not be the best unless you can figure out a very Web2 approach where I don't have to jump through a lot of hoops. But the only other issue is trying to bridge assets over, right? So just having a very clear, concise way to off bridge my assets, to pull my liquidity, And then just hope that the user's educated enough to be able to insert that liquidity over to other chains if they would like, right? So those are kind of my thoughts on it. I'm sorry if I rambled. Happy to kind of discuss a little bit more on anything I've said, but I hope that kind of answers your question a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because there's kind of playing off the points you made. I could see that being applied in a few different ways. As we start to talk about games being, back-ending a lot of the blockchain aspects of it, that could be an instance where we say, yeah, we support various different chains, right? Like in theory, if you're an EVM game, it's relatively straightforward to support 8 to 10 EVM networks, depending on how you do it, right? If you want true asset provenance and all those networks, that's going to be very difficult. And what I mean by that is if I want to be able to take a sword and I want to be able to bridge that sword from ETH mainnet to Polygon, and then from Polygon to AVAX, and then from AVAX to Ancient 8's layer 2. That's going to be a little bit of a challenge if we want to maintain the provenance, because what you're really doing is you're making a copy of that thing on every one of those networks, and then you're essentially custodying in a smart contract, a staking smart contract, a copy of a copy of a copy as this thing moves around. But there's other models, and I think sometimes, when we start to think about NFTs and what they represent and provenance and all these different things, we still apply this very archaic 2020, like this is art and we need to see the mint date, right? But a lot of times when you're talking about game assets, and really, I mean, it's actually probably interesting because I think with, for example, what sorry, I need water. What Seed Photo is doing, this may be completely different, right? Because provenance might be so much more important there, and bridging may not be an option. But when we're thinking about like a game asset, like an item or a resource, chances are you want that asset and the ownership and all that stuff because you want to be able to transfer it. You want to be able to sell it. You want to be able to tap into outside liquidity. You don't really care what the mint date says in the token metadata. So, one of the things we've thought about, for example, is a burn-in, burn-out system, or a burn-in, mint-out system, which makes it super easy, right? Like the player has an NFT on one blockchain, they burn it, they mint, your backend allows them to mint another one on another blockchain. Now there's no custodial bridging, there's no smart contract, you don't have to set up all the ramps, it's one in, one out. You lose the provenance. So, okay, that's a sacrifice. But I think that, we're going to start to talk about more practical implementations. If we're talking about back-ending, if we're talking about account abstraction, and we're going to start to change the way we think about this idea of decentralizing games. And I think as we do, being chain agnostic not only becomes more important, but it becomes easier, right? Because we kind of get to this philosophical point where we're saying, well, if we're going to be custodying a copy of a copy of a copy anyways that dates back to this asset somewhere, like what percent of our gamer base is actually going to care about that versus let's keep this clean and just do, a burn and mint type of system, which makes things a lot easier and allows you to support way more chains and tap into more markets. So, I mean, these are the things we think about, I think, as game developers when we're making, philosophical decisions about how to architect our platform. I know it's something that, platforms like Sequence and Third Web are thinking about when they're setting up Rails for game developers and other projects to actually be chain agnostic and what that actually means. But then I think you could make the counter argument, and now I'm really blabbing, but in theory, at some point, the Rails are going to be so good that it actually doesn't matter. Like maybe, things are so back-ended that I could be a game that only focuses on Polygon, but I can market to the AVAX ecosystem. I could market to the Ancient 8 ecosystem. I could market to, the Binance ecosystem, because for all intents and purposes, sure, it's being stored on Polygon, but with a MetaMask wallet or, any of these Wallet Connect wallets, you could tap right in and bridging the resources is so easy. And again, what is the value prop? Like, do you actually care if you're a Binance user that item is stored on the Polygon mainnet if you can access it from your wallet in a seamless way, if when you pay for it, you can use your BNB or USDC or the token that's on Binance, and then when you sell it, that item, it goes out and you get your BNB or whatever on Binance, even though the asset was on Polygon the whole time. If all that gets abstracted away, does it really matter? I mean, are we achieving chain agnosticism even by concentrating on one chain? And I think that's a little bit of a different question. It's kind of more on, are we putting this on the developers, or are we putting it on kind of the tech stack to make blockchains more agnostic? I mean, Polygon's a good example. They're building Ag Layer, right? The whole idea of Ag Layer is to do just that, to aggregate different EVM layers and to allow, kind of this cross-chain functionality without really discriminating with what chain you're on. And it's, something I think is pretty cool, and, an evolution of what they had started as, which was just, an Ethereum scaling solution. And I think, so my opinion is we may not have to make that decision, because I think the tech may end up making it for us as developers. Chain agnosticism may just become the new standard for blockchain. I see some hands. So why don't we head to Bando first and then over to Scott? Because Scott, let's go to Bando first and then over to.
Yeah, thank you, Satoshi Bears. Well, I think that there's a big problem when we talk about chains and all the stuff that you want to integrate to your applications. I think in a near future, it will be doesn't matter if you are Ethereum Maxi or Solana Maxi or whatever Maxi you are. There's going to be a phase where the user will only use whatever chain he wants to use, but just use like USDC and whatever chain you want. And that's a good example. Many applications are evolving in not being only like Ethereum Maxi or EVM Maxi, and integrate more wallets like Solana. So I don't know, if you want that your product be successful, you need to adapt to more users that only a chain it's going to give you. So yeah, that's my opinion. Right now in Bando, we only have Celo because they are very good friends of us. But yeah, the plan is to integrate whatever chain the user needs to they can use our product, and hope we can get this to any product that we use in our normal lives, because I think it's important to give like more options to the users. We're all doing this for the users. Without users, we are nothing. So we need to listen to our user, which chains they are using. Solana is helping a lot building startups, so that's why many people are moving there. But yeah, that's my opinion. In the near future, the chains are not going to be the most important thing. Only the tokens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that touches on, some of the points we were saying before. It's just, the tech stack it might help us make this decision for us, right? And you're just going to have to pivot the way we've had to pivot every 6 months in this industry. Scott, talk to us.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention how you gave an example of an NFT stuck on one blockchain. We actually built the bridge so that you can transfer the asset to Polygon, Sui, Ethereum, BNB. You can actually take that NFT and bridge it directly on Seed Photo. So that's something, the technologies that we built that make Seed Photo special, I feel, and different than a lot of other places. It doesn't necessarily stick a person to one place. If they want to switch it, we give them that ability to do that on our end. So I think that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. It's tough too, because we see kind of this evolution of art platforms and photography, obviously being a subsection. I think that there's been some unfortunate realizations that the space has had over the last 4 years, as we've learned more about the technology and some of these early pieces. We a couple major early digital art platforms have gone out of business, and we've seen issues with metadata, which is just so huge, right? When we're talking about historical NFTs, metadata pointing to centralized servers where, you've got a real problem when that company goes down and those servers aren't up anymore, and you lose the ability to access those NFTs, especially when we're thinking, this is the way of digital persistence forever, right? And we're seeing maybe it's not even going to persist for a couple of years on some of these platforms. And so thinking about these issues as the tech is evolving, I think what you just said is a good example of, even as a art platform, maybe especially as an art platform, if this value proposition we're putting forth is digital provenance and persistence, right? I think we have to be thinking deeply about how this space evolves. And I think, when we're talking about we're talking about blockchain survivability, the ability to bridge, especially if you're on, some of these newer layer twos. I think this is, unfortunately, 2 or 3 years ago, I think the problem was people didn't really understand metadata. I think 2 or 3 years from now, people aren't going to fully understand, the survivability of all these new layer twos that are popping up and rolling up and may not survive, the next cycle. And I think that when we look at that and we see, the decisions developers have to do, you almost have to allow people to kind of spread around their eggs and be in multiple places, because you really don't know which are going to persist, which are going to continue to be supported, which are going to have some major exploit and you're going to have to respond. And if you don't have the pieces in place, you're in a tough spot. And I think we've seen that with the first wave. We'll probably, unfortunately, see it again, because I think the tech is still so new that we're still figuring stuff out and people are doing the best they can. But I think it's important, like what you guys are doing, what you just said with the, multi-chain availability. There are trade-offs, right? You're building that tech, you're thinking, okay, what do people care about? Why have this versus that? And it's important to be making those decisions, knowing that 2 or 3 years from now is when they might, become super relevant, when there is a change, when there is a new standard, when it's like, okay, this thing that I bought for 30 grand, 3 years ago, I may not be able to see the picture anymore. And that's, that's what was important to me. So, we've got to learn from those mistakes, but also, just from this development cycle, and, constantly be trying to create to further the goals, really focus on the value proposition. So definitely great discussion. Now I'm going to kick it back to Spencer, because I know we've got several individual questions we are going to go through. So let's keep the convo going with some of those individual questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. So our first individual question is going to go to also Nick at Ancient 8. So why do you think guilds are important for Web3 gaming for both players and developers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting because the guild model has been changed so much, and I wouldn't say moved on from, but if you look at all the big guilds like YGG, Ancient 8, and then you kind of look at like those guilds and they've moved over to like gaming communities. And so, you can call them guilds, you can call them gaming communities, but I think they're extremely crucial, right? Because when you look at it from that lens, you have, YP's gaming community, right? You have Catalyst, you have Paladins, you have Degens, you have all these gaming communities. And I think it's really good because they all kind of specialize in their own way, whether it be through a demographic or through a gaming genre that they all enjoy, right? And so I think that it's extremely crucial for discoverability and awareness, right? Normally if games are looking to go to market, especially more on a smaller scale, right? Maybe an alpha, maybe a beta. I think these gaming communities are extremely crucial because they've tried so many Web3 games, right? It's almost like this niche of Web3 gamers that have tried so many different games, so many different genres, so many different in-game economies, right? Which I think is always the most interesting part of Web3 games. And so that's why I think they'll always be important. It's really good for you to run through these guys because these guys are extremely picky, and extremely, like, they've tried so many things that they know what they want, they know what they like, and they know what they don't like. And so I think gaming communities will always play a big crucial role, especially in the Web3 side. I think more on the Web2 side, it's more of like content creators, micro creators that kind of create their own gaming communities. And so I think this is how Web3 is done, right? Kind of through this guild model in a sense. But that's kind of my thoughts on the roles that these gaming communities will play. I don't think they're going anywhere. If anything, I think that they're going to continue to bring more and more value to games, especially because you've seen last year, you've seen like, for discoverability and awareness, KOLs played a big part, right? Or these gaming creators, whatever you want to call them, especially on the Web3 side. And what you're starting to notice now is you're starting to see a lot of these creators start to belong and start to go into gaming communities or create their own gaming communities because they realize the power in that, especially because we as games want to move past just awareness and discoverability. And we actually want to bring in actual retained users that are going to have purchasing power as well, right? And so curating a community and understanding your community, I think will play a massive role. So those are my thoughts on it, right? Like if you're gaming, you're trying to get some more awareness, in Southeast Asia, right? And you're trying to bring more users and you know that your user base that you want to hit is Southeast Asia, you go to YGG, you go to Ancient 8, right? I know a couple, like if you want India, you go to KGen, who used to be IndieGG. If you want, LATAM, then you go to Ola GG, right? So it's just like, it's things like that where I think that it's really nice because there's a lot of communities that have curated a focus that can kind of help a game depending on what their needs are. So that's kind of my thoughts on it, on gaming communities and the future and if they play a role or not in all of this.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I have a little bit of a different perspective, I think, from the developer standpoint, but also as a member of some of these gaming communities. My take has always been Web3. One of the amazing things about Web3, at least the kind of the persistent model for the last 4 years, is that great games and cool games and these kind of niche experimentation games using Web3 economies can emerge out of small communities that are just very passionate about these games and therefore they fund them and are now like very skin in the game, incentivized to play them. And so unlike a lot of these games in the traditional gaming space where you're spending 3-4 years making a game and maybe just getting some internal play tests and feedback from that, you can get from these gaming guilds, from the communities, from your own community, real tangible feedback from stakeholders who really care to put the time in and give you their thoughts on the game. And I think if you're a Web3 developer, if you're developing any product in Web3, that user feedback is so valuable to you. And like you were saying, these are users who are specifically blockchain enabled, who are willing to jump through the hurdles, who are willing to play early games, who are used to a certain type of incentivization model to do such things. And you can kind of tap into that and you can say, look, at no cost or low cost to me, right? I create a token and I allocate a certain amount for these testers to come in, for these people, these early members of the community to come in and test the game. And then they are directly incentivized to be part of that game's long-term success. That model is great. Now, I think there's problems there, right? I think we've seen as much benefit as these guilds and games, these communities can bring. Sometimes they're coming in and they're just extracting. And I think that as a Web3 developer, you have to expect a certain amount of extraction, and that becomes tough. But yeah, I see your hand up, Nick. Let's go back to you.
Yeah, definitely. I think me and you are on the same page in terms of, when I mentioned launching a beta and alpha, these gaming communities are good. And to your point, feedback is very good. I was over at Mixmob and we valued feedback a lot and we did a lot of test builds, with the community. And one thing I want to say is you also have to be very, very careful with that as well. Make sure that the product is in at least a good enough state and that you have a clear, concise understanding of what you want to get out of it. And you have a clear, concise communication to them of what you want to get out of it. Because I think I've seen so many times games thinking that you just go to these gaming communities and you give them a $2,000 prize pool and a half-baked product, and we're going to get all these users and they're going to love it and they're just going to come for the money. But the problem is then they don't come back, right? And then they have this kind of like bad taste in their mouth of your game because Web3 gaming is small. And it's only getting smaller, right? It was pretty big 4 years ago in terms of how many games we're trying to build. And obviously that number is slowly getting smaller. And so you have to be very careful because they will give you feedback, but they will also write you off if they don't like the product or if you go about things incorrectly. We've seen a lot of games try to use these gaming communities for revenue in terms of mints or sales or tokens or X, Y, and Z, or, hey, if your community comes, we'll give them a multiplier, blah, 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 blah. And so many times they get burnt one way or another, whether mints move, prices move, rules change. So just be very careful is all I'm saying, because to your point, Nick, everything you said is so true, but it's a very fine line to walk, especially in Web3 gaming, because I think a lot of these gaming communities have been abused in a sense by developers. And so just really understanding what you want to get out of it and bringing value to them outside of money, I think is so crucial, because if we continue to reward people only in the form of currency, you're only going to attract those types of users instead of trying to bring something beyond just currency, right? And what I always say is an experience, whether that be a tournament, whether that be leaderboards, whether that be, a good product, X, Y, and Z. Those are just kind of my thoughts on the feedback, and really building in public's hard because you're going to get a lot of criticism at the same time, right? So it's just walking that fine line, because it's extremely difficult. I'm not here to say that it's easy or anything. It's far from that. I actually do not envy, founders. You guys are fucking gladiators for coming into Web3 and starting to build gaming, man, because this shit is hard and it's not easy. So I just wanted to add that last point, to kind of build off of what you're saying, Nick, but I completely agree.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with you. I mean, I think that it's funny because we spent about 3 years building our game, and sometimes we're just like, well, we don't have millions of dollars to pay KOLs and people to post about this, and we're seeing good retention numbers, but how do we get people to just play the game, right? Just get the relevant community in the game, and I think for us, the gaming communities present a very interesting user because of a couple things. One, we are a high fidelity game, and so for us, we need a user that's a hardcore gamer, and finding a hardcore Web3 gamer can sometimes be difficult. So if you hit these gaming communities, you're kind of already sifting through the niche, so you're hitting a very relevant user. But like you said, the game's got to be ready. The game has to be in a place where you want people to see it, and you want kind of, you don't want the person who invested with you at, day one and already has a ton of skin in the game and is just there to support, because those people are fundamental to a community and to what you're building. But sometimes when you need that more tangible feedback, when you feel the game is ready, I think you can tap into these gaming communities, because I can go and I can say, hey, Ancient 8 YGG, look, we've got a game that requires a 2090 or 2070 or whatever it is, graphics card, and you need to have a PC that can play, higher fidelity games, and you have to have a wallet, so you have to know how to connect it. And there's going to be a lot of people in that game that can check that box. Where if I just go kind of, shotgun approach marketing this, 7 out of 10 people who see the game see the ad may not even be able to play it, because there's not that necessary cross section between the Web3 space and necessarily people with gaming PCs or hardcore gamers. So yeah, I couldn't agree more that the game needs to be ready and you have to be careful. But I do think, yeah, like you said, this is a very particular audience that, if used correctly, right, or if worked with, I wouldn't even say used, I would say if you work with them correctly, could be a huge value add to a project. So definitely a big fan of the Gaming Guild. And I agree that, even the best example, you look at Axie, there was a, pretty strong tie-in between why Axie had a lot of problems and the early gaming guilds. And that was just experimentation that didn't work, right? And they've evolved and the guilds have evolved. So it's cool, because that's what I was saying before, we keep evolving. And I think that's the important part in this space, is we're experimenting a lot. We need to keep evolving. So anyways, just to get to the rest of the questions, I'll kick it back to Spencer to keep us going.
Thank you, Nick. And then just a reminder to anybody who maybe has joined us since the beginning of the space when we announced our giveaway, but we're giving away 5 Satoshi's crystals, which is our main in-game resource within our game. In order to win that, all you have to do is repost that tweet that is pinned at the top from the Hideout that says we're live, and then just stick around until the end of the space. So yeah, just a reminder there. Moving on to our next individual question, which is going to go to Alex Terminus. So what is an offline fiat payment network for crypto? And what impacts do you think this technology will have on the user experience around crypto payments?
Sure. And just before starting, it's very interesting to listen to you speaking about gaming in Web3. It's very interesting topic. Now, yeah, back to the question. Well, a network of fiat offline payments actually lets people pay with cryptocurrencies at regular stores for everyday purchases. And what I mean by regular store, I mean restaurants, coffee shops, grocery shops. Well, any shops where you go in your normal life. And the key point here is that those merchants, those stores, they don't receive cryptos for those payments, but instead they receive fiat currency. They receive their local currency in their bank accounts. And a key thing to keep in mind is that I think when you look at those, pay-fi solutions, it's not to create a new Web3 payment system. Instead, you need to connect already, Web3 solutions, such as wallets, such as liquidity pools, and so on, to the pre-existing Web2 payment systems, like a terminal for credit cards, like QR codes, as we use at terminals, or like any other Web2 payment system that are already existing out there. And I can give you an example with what we do at Terminus Network. Our network work with this pre-existing QR code payment system. I guess Nick from Ancient Age know about that because you are, I understand, based in Southeast Asia. But in Southeast Asia, you don't see all the time terminals like as we used to see in the US or Europe, but instead we have those QR codes that are already displayed in all merchants displayed. And by using those already Web2 payment system, the payment flow is very simple because the user can go to a store, connect his wallet to our solution, scan this QR code, enter the amount to pay, and that's all. The crypto will be converted to fiat currency and directly sent to the merchant bank account. And when you look at this technology, it can be super useful for crypto users because now you can use crypto in daily life, not just for investment or speculations. And instead of using your cash, credit card, phone wallet, and so on, now you can use your crypto to buy a cafe or simply using your smartphones. And as well as a PayFi solution, we have to speak about merchants. And again, those new PayFi solutions, they need to be as simple as possible to use, because we want to scale up quickly. And to do so, we need to make a solution where the merchant, they don't need to understand crypto. They don't need to deal with price changes when you make conversion from crypto to fiat. They don't need to have a new infrastructure. They don't need to have new hardware to receive these payments. No, in the perfect life, they need to do nothing to receive these crypto payments. And again, I think that's a key point for any PayFi solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, it's kind of this rising sea thing. As more people are using and seeing crypto in their daily lives, it can hit every aspect of their life. It's so multifaceted from an adoption standpoint. So important, the kind of work that you guys are doing to just get more people, crypto familiar and vendors and users and shoppers, making it easy, making it more clear that this currency is real and it's something that people can use. So thank you for that. Back to Spencer.
Thank you. So the next individual question is going to be for Seed Photo, Scott. So how can Web3 be used to ensure fair compensation for photographers, especially concerning royalties on secondary sales?
Great question, actually. We believe Web3 offers a transformative solution to one of the photography industry's long-standing challenges, and that's fair and transparent compensation. So we actually leverage blockchain technology, and we allow these images or the actual photographs to have Web3 contracts built into them. So we're able to actually distribute or royalties to photographers every time their work is resold, no matter how many times it changes hands. So we have that built-in royalty mechanism. When a photographer mints these works on Seed Photo, they set a royalty percentage. This royalty is locked into the smart contract, and it gets triggered automatically on each resale. So I think that's amazing. Also, every transaction is recorded on the blockchain, meaning the photographers can track where their work is going and where it's at. So it's not like one person said, like they're scared that it's going to be lost. Well, you're able to track those transactions and know exactly where it is. And ownership and control. Web3 shifts that power back to the creator. So the photographer retains the control over the intellectual property pricing and the licensing terms, something rarely ever possible in the traditional marketplaces. So, I mean, if the person didn't want them to use the photograph that they sold to them for marketing purposes and they wanted to keep that to themselves to be able to use that photo for future marketing purposes, they can still do that. But the actual person themselves would own the actual photograph itself. Or you can actually sell those rights along with the photograph. So I think these are all these amazing things that Seed Photo offers, and it's a lot different than some of the other ones. And to be able to set that, you could do it for the model in the photo. You could set a royalty for them, the makeup artist. It doesn't really matter. You can actually set it for whoever you want in that photo, so that when you are doing that, it gives an opportunity to give back to others. I know as well, you guys were mentioning about metadata. We do store all that metadata as well, which I think is amazing. And we do have a dedicated IPFS node as well for security on our platform, which I also think is amazing. Seed Photo is kind of like one of those platforms that's never stopped evolving and bringing new technologies and new things to the market. And I'm always amazed at what they are doing and how they're working for the photographers to make sure that they're giving back what they duly deserve. So, yeah.
Yeah, as a former lawyer involved in the IP space, I'm definitely excited about the future uses of NFTs for enforcing license and setting built-in license rules and distribution. I think that's something that's badly needed in kind of this right-click save era of royalties and transparent licensing systems. Because there's friction. I think a lot of creatives miss out on a lot of money that people would have willingly paid had there been a more direct licensing scheme. So I think that's awesome what you guys are doing, and thank you for that. Kicking it back to Spencer.
All right, so we have time for our final individual question, and then we'll wrap things up. So the final question is going to go to Bando. So what are the key friction points when trying to spend crypto for real world goods and services?
I'm not seeing. Oh, Bando is currently a listener. Let me see if I can get them back up here. May have lost them. There we go. There we go. Here
Yeah,
we go.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be quick. There are some topics that might complicate the user experience of people trying to buy real stuff with crypto. One of them is the terrible UX of different applications. Also, the breaches and the swaps you need to do, because there are many platforms that you can do this, but they only accept specific tokens and chains. And also maybe the use of specific credit cards of crypto cards that you need to use in specific places, that you need the USDC on a specific chains like Solana or maybe Linea or stuff like that. Yeah, and with Bundle, we're trying to reduce these complicated stuff for the users. And only you enter to our application, select the stuff you want, and just click buy. And all these smart contracts, we're going to add more chains, but yeah, in less than 5 clicks, you can have your favorite products. And I think that's the main goal. Do the user experience more easy, more accessible, and also with a clean UX. We all love clean UX, so we're trying to do this for our users. And yeah, I think that's the most complicated. And I think this space is focused on like on web and gaming. On Bando, you can find like all the Web2 game stuff you want, Steam, Free Fire, and PUBG, and all that stuff. So yeah, we're trying to solve that, and the user is our main goal. So yeah, that will be all for our side. Thank you, guys.
Amazing. Well, yeah, I totally agree. And it's interesting as a crypto user, but obviously as a real person who spends money in the real world, it's always been an interesting dynamic of, do I use my crypto or use my credit card or whatever it is? And I think that I may not be the target audience sometimes, living in the US and having the bank and whatever it is, but there's so many places. When I travel to Argentina, for example, or when I'm in Colombia, there's so many places where the systems aren't as accessible, or there's real problems with the system that crypto can solve. And this self custody of debanking, right? Like this idea of debanking and the ability to still spend in normal retailers your self custodied assets, I think is such an important thing. And right now, I think one of the challenges with these crypto credit cards is oftentimes you need to have those assets on a centralized exchange. So, I think that that's cool, right? And it's fine for people who may be able to do that and may be able to connect a bank account and do all the KYC and all those things, but not everybody has those things available to them. So the ability to kind of tap into more decentralized systems for using crypto to make everyday payment, I think is such a huge gap that needs to be filled throughout the world. So I think you guys are doing some great work to fill that gap, and I appreciate your perspective. So I guess we are at the end of the hour. So what I will say is huge thank you to the guests. Again, we got into some topics that we don't always get into, but this is why this space stays interesting, and we do this every week. We have a diverse group of panelists who come on, and I think that, it's something that really is valuable for me personally. It's always nice to pop our heads up from the constant grind of building and, make sure that we're keeping our thumb on what's going on in the space. And it just continues to show that there are so many great builders doing great things in this space, whether it's going to conferences or this spaces. It's such an honor for me to continue to be able to work with all of you and to continue to push this space forward together. So thank you for taking an hour out of your time. Thank you to everyone in the audience who attended. Again, we do this every week. So please, give all the speakers a follow, give the Hideout account a follow, check out Satoshiverse. I know we did introductions earlier today, but everything we're building, all the new stuff, can be found on our Twitter page and on the pinned tweet at the top of the spaces. So check it out. It's all free. Lots of work has gone into it. Lots of cool stuff. And please do also check out all the other projects on here. They are all working hard to make this space better. So thank you again to all the speakers. And that will wrap it up. There's about a 30-second delay, so I'm going to wait a few seconds, and then I will end the spaces. Thank you so much. And we will go from there.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. See you later.